All right, well, here we go. Let's go ahead and jump into it. So, just so you guys are aware kind of how tonight's going to run, basically what I'm going to do is I got a little bit of information that I want to share with you kind of about Vex Worlds, about what I like to do when I go to competitions, and then we'll open up the floor and be like, all right, what kinds of questions do you guys have? And you guys are welcome to, during that time, I'll set it up so you guys can unmute yourself and basically ask me any and all questions that you guys might have about anything from Vex to, competitions and whatever. So let's go ahead and jump into it. Cool, well, welcome. Yeah. So, format of tonight, just so you guys kind of have an idea. First, I know some of you guys are not here from Vex Worlds. Some of you guys are just like teams who are tuning in, and that's totally fine. And those of you guys who are at Vex Worlds, you're probably aware that the brand new game is going to be released literally at Vex Worlds. So, the competition is starting on Monday. On Tuesday, it's going to finish, and they're going to release the new challenge. So it's coming up here really fast. And so we're going to kind of talk through a few tips that I have for how to get started and make sure that you're 100% ready for this new challenge. Then, for those who are either at Vex Worlds 2022 right now, or if you're going to be at a competition anytime in the future, I got some kind of cool tips for you on how to get the most out of your competitions and make sure that when you go to a competition that you're really basically giving it all that you can. And there's a few kind of weird tips and tricks that I've learned over the years that I want to share with you as well. And then we'll open up the floor for questions. Cool. So real quick, let's go ahead and jump into what it looks like moving into next year. Now, if you were with me, I think it was just over a week ago, we did like a whole big fancy moving into next year session where basically I explained in detail all of the steps that you go through if you're a coach in order to help lead your team through. Now, this meeting is going to be much shorter than that one. We won't have time to cover all the fancy steps. So I just want to give you like a 10-mile overview for students and coaches alike. Basically, what does it look like to jump into a new game? Vex IQ Challenge Slapshot's coming up in just a few weeks here. What's it going to look like to get started with that? What's it going to look like kind of as you're moving through that? So let's go ahead and dive into it. The key with getting a new game is you want to start on track for success. I mean, it's always nice to end where you want to be, but it sure makes it a whole lot easier if you at least start where you're trying to go, right? If you take off in an airplane and you are headed south, even though you're trying to go to the North Pole, you can get there eventually and you turn the airplane around and you can go back there. But it's often much easier if you start headed in the right direction. So that's what, at least the first part of tonight, we'll spend like 15 minutes or so on it. That's what this is focused on. So let's go ahead and dive into it. You get the new challenge. The first thing, often actually before you even get your new challenge, one of the first things that I like to do is define goals for my team. Now, these are not like big complex goals that are like whole paragraphs or essays that you're writing. They're just real simple. Some examples of simple goals, maybe you want to win a tournament. That's a pretty good simple goal, right? So say I just want to be able to, there we go. My laser pointer didn't work. There we go. All right, maybe I just want to win a tournament, right? That's totally fine. Maybe I have the goal of winning worlds. That one's a pretty big goal, but that's totally fine as well. The idea is you want it to be simple, though. You don't want it to be like some big complex thing that you have to spend like an hour to understand. You want it to be something that is easy and clear and you can reference. So this just kind of, if you think about it, it'll initially set your team on track for the right direction. It's like when you get on a road trip and you say, all right, I am going somewhere, and you say, all right, I am going to go to Sequoia National Forest, and then you find the roadmap to get there. Or maybe you decide, I just want to have fun on my road trip. I am going to get on a road trip. I got this much money in my pocket. I got this much gas in my tank, and we're just going to go and have some fun. And that's awesome too, but you got to be aware of that when you start. So your goal might be something more complex. It might be something like winning the world championship. It might be something like really specific. It could also be, we just want to have a great time. So maybe you want to, learn how to code, or you just want to build cool stuff. I remember this one team, they would build really cool stuff every year, and that was their goal. They would build on purpose, not very competitive robots, because they just didn't think they were that cool to build like the best robot. Instead, they wanted to like test this really specific mechanism. And so they do that. And that was fine as well. But the key is they knew where they were going. And that's kind of one of the first steps here. Now, while you're doing this, obviously make sure you keep in mind your team's resources. If you are a first-year team, which none of you guys will be next year because this is probably, it'll be at least your second year. But if you're a first-year team, like, probably don't shoot for winning the world championship. If you have, like, no time to build robots, don't build a super-duper complicated robot. Long story short, just kind of keep in mind how many resources you have. And that is, again, something we go into more detail on in that other session I was talking about. But yeah, basically make sure that you got some idea of where you're going. And it doesn't have to be binding. You can change these goals throughout season if things change, time commitments change, circumstances change. Maybe COVID happens again or something. It's totally fine to change them, but the idea is you want to have something in mind. Cool. Once you finish defining your goals, that's great. The goal is to learn the game. And you're like, all right, how on earth do I learn a game? The most obvious way to do it is to read the rules. Reading the rules is sometimes a little bit long and cumbersome, though. So the real key thing that we want to do is make sure we understand gameplay. Now, if you're really like going to try and win world champs, maybe it's a good idea to read all of the rules. Personally, I do read all the rules. As coaches, a lot of coaches will read all the rules. Students, I mean, you know, it's great if you read all the rules, but it's not necessary because they're so long. I mean, they're 35 pages. The key is that you understand that gameplay. This is the 35-page rule manual. Ordinarily, what I actually do is instead I've got like this 2-page game summary, and that does it for me. I don't need to do anything fancy. I don't need to like make a huge, I don't know, like hour-long session of reading the rules. I can just like, you know, read the summary. It takes about 10 minutes. Honestly, it only takes 5 minutes because the first page, this one is the only one that has game information. The back of that is all the tournament stuff, which doesn't really change. It says like, you play matches. What happens if you no-show for a match? What is a skills match? What's a programming match? Where are your starting positions? Things like that. So the front of it's really the key, this page, and that explains basically 90% of what you need. Now, this last step is kind of optional. I sometimes like to do it as I'm getting to know a game. If I have no idea what it's going to be like, and I'm like, wow, I've never seen this before. I did this with pitching in. I had never seen a shooting game in Vex IQ. I wasn't around, or I was around, but I wasn't doing Vex IQ. I was doing other robotics when Bank Shot happened. So I got to, for pitching in, kind of get some experience, we call it, which means basically building a really simple robot. So you get the new Vex IQ challenge. You look at it, you're like, yes, this is exciting. I want to build a robot. Start with something simple is the key, right? If you have some big elaborate robot that you need to build to even play the game the first time and see like how the game dynamics work, see how hard it is to shoot the balls, then it'll take you like weeks. I'll often build like a clawbot and then like put something simple on the back. So this is for next level. We were trying to see how you climb, right? And so basically this is literally a clawbot. You can see that, except instead of a claw, we put this weird hooky thing, and this student was basically discovering how to climb. And it actually worked, which is rather surprising. I wasn't expecting it to. But yeah. So basically build a simple robot and you just play the game. Test out whatever you're doing. Sometimes I'll even build half a robot. Like I'll just build the catapult, for example, and not worry about the intake or something like that. Or, you know, I'll just build an arm and a claw, and I don't need a drive base because I know how to build drive bases. The key is to figure out what works, what doesn't, and just get a real good feel for what the game is. So that's the second step. You got to learn the game. The third step, this is probably one that so many teams miss, is designing robot concepts. All right, what on earth does it mean to design a robot concept? The idea is you want something really simple. It literally takes like 30 seconds to design a robot concept. It's not a robot CAD. It's not any like a detailed drawing or anything. It's just like a thought, basically. You know, you had a quick brain fart and you draw it down. That is a robot concept. Great. In general, they're simple, they're fast, and you need lots of them. So, like, I'll show you 3 examples of mine for an old game that, obviously, I don't know what the new game is. I'm going to be drawing these for the new game. I'll show you some of mine for an old game. But basically, the idea is it's super simple. I draw them with Sharpie on paper often, just because Sharpie's on purpose, like, really messy. You know, you can't draw, like, precise drawings with Sharpie usually. And so I'll draw it with Sharpie to make it on purpose messier. Some people draw it on whiteboards. That's nice if you want to save paper. Either way, though, super useful, super nice to have these whiteboard drawings. So this is a picture of my whiteboard drawing of a robot. You're like, wow, you're a good artist. Yeah, basically, this took me like 15 seconds to draw, and I bet you could draw it in 15 seconds too. But the key is it captures the robot. Like you can see the entire robot here. Here's the drive. It's got wheels. I don't know how they're going to be attached, but I built drive bases before. There's an arm. Here I've got like a 4-bar mechanism, and it's able to stack these little purple things. The name of the game literally that year, or not literally, but the name of the game was effectively stack up these purple things, and there also came in green and orange. But basically, you just have to make stacks of 3 and put them in the goal. So that's what it looked like in theory. And then this is what it looked like in reality. You can see it's exactly the same. We got our drive base here. We got our vertical up here, and there's our 4-bar. And then here in the background, you can see the purple things that we were stacking. They're really like tealish, I guess. And then we had the orange ones as well. So I was like, all right, well, that's cool. But what if I had a more complex mechanism? Maybe my robot is not that simple. Well, you make it a little more complex. This one, for reasons we can describe later, is not a very good robot to start with. You can see it's got 3 arms on it. 1, 2, 3. And anytime you have like 3 things that are all trying to do like the scissor motion and like work well together, usually that's a sign things are not going to go well for you long term. Not to say this can't be good. This robot was decent, but it had a lot of problems when it came to trying to control all 3 arms at the same time, and they'd like get stuck on each other, or like you'd move one and then like the other one would move to try and get out of the way, but it didn't need to. It was complicated. But the key is, you can see, like I drew it out, it looks pretty simple on paper, and then this is what it looks like, and it almost exactly matches. So as a design concept and then implementing it, that whiteboard drawing or that like quick Sharpie drawing of it was really effective. You can see how like smoothly it converts over. We got 2 4-bars and like a little doohickey in the front. And then we got, come on, 2 4-bars and that little doohickey in the front. That's a little hard to see there. Cool. So those 2 robots didn't work so great. The first one worked pretty well, but it was just really slow. The second one, I was trying to stack all 3 at a time, and I was like, that's cool, but not really. And then here's the third robot. This one is a drive base, just like the other one. It's a 4-bar, except this one, it's got like this weird slashy claw thing. The slashes don't mean anything in particular. I just like put them there because they look cool. And they made me think of claws, and so I used them. And so basically, this one, it was a arm, and that would like grab 2 of them, kind of like this. And when I built that for real, you can see it's, again, very, very similar. You got your drive base, got the arm, and claw and stuff like that. And it's really hard to see, but down here, there is that little doohickey, the little whoop, that shoots out the front here to pick up that 3rd riser. That was there as well. Now, the reason I want to show you guys these is because basically it's a really fast way to design robots. And as you're drawing them, I'll often draw like 10 of these at least before I start a new game. Sometimes I'll even draw more. But the reason I draw them, on paper instead of in my head is because as you draw things on paper, you see things that you wouldn't otherwise see. So often, I'll be drawing and then someone next to me will be drawing also. I'll look over and I'll be like, ooh, I like your drawing. And then, homework, it's cheating to copy someone else. Here it's not. You're like, oh, I like your drawing. All right, let me try and copy that. And then you'll like take it and you're like, oh, but I can make it better. And you'll add on like another arm or you'll add a claw or whatever you want. But the key is it really gets you an idea of what you can do, and it lets you share it with other people. Also, sometimes you'll look at your old drawings, like from 5 minutes ago, old, right? And you'll be like, whoa, this is so cool. And then you'll like be able to implement that, and you'll be able to put 2 or 3 of them together and get an even better robot. So that's often how I design a lot of my robots, and that's how at least most of them have been so good. So, now, like I said before, you want to make lots of designs. The more designs you can make, the better. And then as you're going, combine them. Don't be afraid to kind of stick them together if that's what you need. Finally, a few things to keep in mind. In general, simpler drawings are better. Like, there's, you probably heard the acronym KISS, right? Keep it super simple. You add more S's if you want it to be more intense, But keep it super simple. That's valuable. Obviously not too simple. I like to keep it as simple as I can, but not simpler. That's what Albert Einstein says. So, yeah. Keep your robots as simple as you can, but not simpler. Then, basically, as you're going through your robots, the second thing I really like to do is optimize for a few goals first. Now, when you get the new game, right? We're going to get it in like 3 days. There's probably going to be many things that you could do. You could climb, you could shoot balls. I don't know what the game is. Maybe you're throwing a puck across the field. We'll talk about predictions in a minute. But basically, the idea is you're going to have plenty of options. How do you decide which ones you want to pursue? Um, Basically, the way you do it is you pick the most important ones and you do that first. If you look at my first robots for any year, it's always really good at a few things, or at least it was a good robot. Some of my older robots are not so good, just for reference. But the ones that I like are really good at a few things, and then they kind of skip the other ones until they've mastered the first few. So for pitching in, I focused first only on shooting the balls in the high goal. My robots couldn't climb, they couldn't do anything fancy, they could go into the low bar, and they could shoot high. They couldn't do a low climb, they couldn't do a high climb. That was it. They like focused on one thing, and then after we mastered that, we were like, all right, let's expand into others. The final thing that I really like to do is start small and grow fast. I stole this from another guy who actually doesn't do robots, but he does something similar. And basically this principle says you want to start with a simple thing. If it's just like a part of a robot even, maybe I'll start with so for pitching in, for example, I'll start with just a set of flywheels and see if I can make them shoot in the first place before I like build the entire robot. Because if I have to build a whole robot to test a concept, then I'm going to be really, really slow at testing, right? I won't be able to test as fast. But if I can start with something really, really small, that's how you're able to test. And just for reference, whenever I like build robots, it's not like a one-stop shop where I just like show up and like boom, out comes a great robot. I usually build 10 or 20 robots that completely fail before I end up with the robot that works. Cool. So you've got your design concepts. Then it's time to build and test. Now there is a lot that goes into building and testing, so I'm not going to go into it in detail. But you guys probably kind of get the gist of it, right? The secret to success is you got to build it, test it, and repeat. The truth is you are not going to make a good robot the first time, and that's totally fine. So when the new game comes out in like 3 days, you'll be like, yes, let's build robots. And the first robot you build will probably not work. The first robot I build is not going to work. The second robot, third robot, fourth robot, all of them probably won't work until eventually you start to kind of catch some patterns. You'll be like, oh, I get it. And then you'll be able to kind of navigate around it and much better able to basically build a robot. But the secret here is the faster you can build and test and fail and then like build again, the better you'll be effectively. There's this great saying, fail faster. This great coach told me that. And so, I don't know, I love failing faster. It's a good thing. While I was doing research, I came across this picture. I thought it was pretty funny. This is the road to success, is what most people think it looks like, Either you are on the road to success or the road to failure. And if you're on the road to success, you'll just like travel along it nice and smooth until boom, you hit the victory at the end. That's not how it works though, is it? Usually, as you try and go to success, things get in your way and you fail and you lose a match and your robot breaks and then you thought you were going this way, but actually it turns out your whole robot was completely wrong and you got to rebuild it. And you kind of like go back and forth between failure and success, and you're going back and forth, and it's much more complex per se than just like, all right, you're either going to fail or succeed. Oftentimes on the road to success, there's lots of failure, and the best way to get there is by failing. That's the only way to get there, because otherwise you won't learn. There's this great saying, I forget who said it initially, but success is often the result of good judgment, right? And good judgment is often the result of experience. And then experience is often the result of bad judgment. So in effect, you got to start with your bad judgment to get your experience, and then you get your experience, and now you're able to have good judgment and have success. But it's a multi-step process. It's not just like a boom, you've got it, and now like you're going to be successful the rest of your life. That's not how it works. Cool. So that is just about it for as you get into the beginning of a new game. If you're a coach and you're interested in more details, I've got a full hour-and-a-half session. I know it was like 15 minutes. But I've got like a full, I think it's hour-and-a-half or 2-hour session where we go through in detail how to lead your team through that process. So if you're a coach and you're interested, I'll drop the link in the chat. You're able to sign up for that. But I do want to get into some of the other things that probably people are excited about for Vex Worlds. I know a lot of you guys are at Vex Worlds. Actually, real quick, I'm just curious. How many of you guys are at Vex Worlds? Yeah, go ahead and I haven't done polls before, so hopefully that works out well. But go ahead and let me know how many of you guys are currently at Vex Worlds, how many of you guys are attending this year, or how many of you guys aren't. Just kind of get a feel for the room. Here we go. You're going tomorrow? Awesome. If you're like going in a few days, say yes, I'm going to Vex Worlds this year. You're here now? Awesome, Rick. Who else do we got? I see some, it looks like Lucas is here. Whoever, it looks like Lucas is actually a whole bunch of people. How is Dallas? I've been to Dallas's airport, but I haven't actually like toured the city. So, you're going on Monday? Awesome. Going tomorrow? Very nice. All right, cool. It looks like, wow, most of us are at Dallas, about 10% of us are not. That's totally fine. So I'm so glad that all of you guys were able to make it tonight. Go ahead and close that real quick. There we go. Cool. Well, let's go ahead and dive into the other exciting part. So coming up here in just a little bit is Vex IQ Challenge or competition Slapshot. You guys may or may not have seen this yet, but basically Vex released the name of the game and nothing else. So we'll have to see what it is. We'll kind of dive into what our predictions are about that in a little bit. I want to save that till the end, till like right before Q&A. So like, don't let me forget. I want to make sure we do them. But at the same time, I want to be able to talk about them basically right afterwards. So I want to share with you guys Vex Worlds tips before we dive into that. So Vex IQ competition Slapshot, that is going to be our next game. What it looks like, I have no idea. But that's all good. Cool. All right. So for those of you guys who are at Vex Worlds, this is for you. If you're not at Vex Worlds yet and you're coming to a competition soon, this is also for you. Basically, these are some kind of tips. I've been on, I've lost track. Almost a dozen different robotics teams over the past few years. And there are some key things that good teams do, and there's key things that not so good teams don't do. I want to share them with you so that basically you're able to employ these strategies that the best teams basically use in order to be really good. Now, obviously, having a good robot and a good driver is a very important thing. But there's other things than just having a really good robot and a really good driver. If you've been to Worlds before, you know there are robots that look like they could win who are just going to get destroyed. And there's robots who you would never have thought could win who are going to come out on top. Crazy things happen at Worlds, and there's a few things that good teams do, and it's not entirely clear why these things help even, but they really do help make you better. So let's kind of dive into what they are. The first thing is good teams are actually really respectful and helpful to other teams. I know it sounds silly, but I remember when I was on a robotics team, this was a really good robotics team. We won champs twice. So we won the world championship twice on this robotics team. And we would, sometimes be sitting in the stands, and occasionally you hear over your shoulder some other team who's, not talking very nicely about you. In fact, they'd be talking really meanly about either us or about some other team, but one way or another, they weren't saying nice stuff. And the popular reaction is be like, oh, how rude, I wish they wouldn't say those things. But honestly, my reaction was always like, oh, bummer, I guess they're a rookie. Like, teams who talked bad about other teams, especially in public, sometimes we'd talk, like, make sure that we're, like, in our hotel room or something. We would talk about them or talk over the phone. But, like, our team never talked bad about other teams in public. And any team who we saw doing it, we always just thought they were rookies, just because they didn't know that it's not something you do. So that's something interesting, being really respectful of other teams. The other thing, being confident about the rules. I got some specific rules I want to share with you for pitching in that, as a student, you should be aware of. There might not be obvious. Not all the refs know them necessarily. I've received multiple emails from people about a number of these rules asking, what's the call on this? And oftentimes they were judged incorrectly, and because they didn't know the rule, they couldn't fight it. So I want to share those with you. That's a really important thing, though. Know what the rules are, and know that you're right, basically. Um, Another thing, knowing your priorities, basically knowing at a competition, at Worlds, what is the most important thing for you to do? Is it more important for you to have lunch right now, or is it more important for you to prepare for a match? Well, maybe it depends how close your match is. Um, so that's going to be really valuable. Teamwork, preparing for practice matches, and all that good stuff. Um, we're going to talk kind of how basically you get a match, right? And you're going to be working with some other team. How do you do that, basically? And then finally, focusing forward, making sure that, say, something doesn't go to plan, something doesn't work the way you thought it would. How do you look forward and make sure that you're on track for success? Now, once we go through these, I'm going to open up the floor for question and answer. Basically, you guys will be able to unmute yourself at that time, and we'll kind of go through the Q&A. But I wanted to hit these guys real quick, just to make sure that you have the best information you can as we move into Worlds. So, here we go. First of all, helping and respecting others. It seems silly, but honestly, being nice goes a long way. I have time and time again, like, when you're nice to teams, good things tend to happen, especially if you're nice to a team that maybe is your partner in the future. So that's a huge one. But just being nice and polite to teams is really helpful. On the flip side, if you're rude to a team and then end up being paired with them sometime, the odds they're gonna want to cooperate and like work together with you go way down. So in general, you meet a team, just be nice to them. It doesn't mean that you have to like go way far out of your way to be polite, but it is certainly very valuable to be nice. And honestly, the other thing that I like to do is offer help. If I'm in a position to help someone else, do it. I remember I came back from Vex Worlds one year, and we were, the little 45-degree angle, like, connectors? We were way short on those. And I was like, why do we have so few of them? My brother was like, well, because we were helping so many teams, and all of the teams needed them. They were part of a really important mechanism on your robot that year. And so, like, we gave them all away. And that was great because we were able to help so many teams. And actually, I think we got significantly more points because one of the teams had them. I forget their team number, but I do remember we would like put them on like 10 minutes before our match, and they were like, "Whoa, this works so well!" And then like we lost them, but that's okay. They actually gave us some other cool parts in return, so it was well worth it for us. But yeah, cool. So just being nice to others, respecting others, really does make a big difference. The next thing is being confident in the rules. Now, this is really key for students because students are the only ones who are allowed to, after a match, challenge the referees. If the referee makes a mistake, if the referee does something wrong, the students are the only ones who can come up to them and be like, hey, I don't agree with you. Parents are not allowed to, and oftentimes referees will like live by this and say, all right, parents, I don't care what you have to say. You're not allowed to come up to me. It's got to be your students. Which sometimes is frustrating. But, and I don't know if I entirely agree with this rule, but given that this is the rule, it's good to be able to work within it, right? So, some cool rules that you should probably know for pitching in, and there's some of these will roll over to future years. The first one, specifically to pitching in, I think this is the most commonly misjudged rule that I've seen at least, is that robots are allowed to start in any two legal starting positions. If you look at a map of the field, basically, there are 8 spots that robots are allowed to start in, 4 on this side, 4 on this side. A lot of refs say, all right, robots have to start on the opposite sides of the field. That is not the case. So if you're head ref at Worlds, which is unlikely, but if you want to start on the same side, you're allowed to, and the head ref cannot tell you no because basically the rule that they're referencing doesn't apply in that scenario. There's a rule called LRT 6, doesn't apply at any in-person competition ever. And that's usually the one that they're like, oh, well, you can't start on the same side. That's not the case. You guys can absolutely start next to each other. You can start like literally one spot away from each other, almost touching each other. And that's totally fine. Just be aware of that so that if the ref asks you, then you're able to basically challenge that. You can tell them that first there's no rule preventing it, and it's not a specific rule, but basically if there's not a rule that prevents something, you're allowed to do it. And LRT 6, which is the rule that they think applies, doesn't apply in this case, and they can read it and figure out why. So that's really valuable. Now, the next one is probably not one that the judges or refs will call you on, but other coaches may call you on. And I wanted to kind of point this out to you. Just about every year, there is some coach who is a little bit, usually it's the coaches of teams who themselves were not very competitive, but their coach was like hoping they'd do better. And so oftentimes I've seen coaches come up to either me or even my students, which is kind of, I don't know. I don't always like it when they do that. But they'll come up and be like, hey, that robot, that wasn't fully your own design. You got it from online. Now, it is totally legal if you have a robot that was inspired by online stuff. Rule G2 in the game manual references the REC student-centered policy, which basically says that if you're a student and you do research online and you find some robot that you want to copy and then you copy it, that is totally legal. You can give them a specific reference. G2 references the student-centered policy. In page 4 on the green box on mechanical design, it specifies that you're allowed to do that. The only requirement is that the students have to know how the robot is built. Now, if the students built the robot, hopefully you guys know how it's built, right? So students on the team have to know how it's built. It's a pretty easy requirement to fulfill. But especially if a coach is like coming after you, or like a parent from another team, that one's a common one too. Just, be aware. You're in the right. Everything you did is legal. Just, kind of hold your ground. So that's a good one. I think I once had one of my students really get nailed hard by a coach. Like, really unreasonable coach, actually, who, like, came up and just started yelling at him. And I felt really bad for him. I felt bad for the coach, too, because, like, she obviously didn't know how to convey her feelings in a positive manner. But the key is, the robots that you guys have most likely are legal. The only reason that it wouldn't be legal is if, like, you had built it from step-by-step instructions that were somehow, like, illegally posted. But I've never seen them. All of my videos are totally legal. All of the videos I've seen on YouTube are totally legal. So yeah. Cool. This is another one that at Worlds probably won't be an issue. At other competitions is certainly an issue. And going forward beyond this season is going to be an issue probably. But regardless of whether you turn in an engineering notebook, you get a judging interview. You have a chance to win some of the awards. Now, engineering notebooks help your chances of winning, but they are not binding. And if you basically, every team needs a judging interview if they're going to do judging interviews at all. So either every team gets it or no team gets it. That's on the bottom of the judge's guide on page 22. But basically, there's a lot of events this year with rumors of judges not having interviews with teams who didn't turn in notebooks. That's not allowed. Just be aware that you deserve an interview. And if they ask you about that, you can reference this and yeah. So just something to kind of keep up your sleeve. Next time it happens to you, if it does happen to you, you whip this out and be like, hey, I actually happen to know that I do get a judging interview even though I don't have a notebook. And that's totally fine to tell them, and you can basically get yourself an interview, which is pretty cool. Now, this one, very specific to pitching in. I don't think this one's going to be misjudged, but it is something to be aware of, that robots are not allowed to hold more than 2 balls while climbing. This one is probably not going to be those giant dumper robots that you'll see, basically, but rather, as you're going through the competition, the odds that you will see a robot try and climb while they still have 4 balls like in their robot is pretty high. If you imagine, say you're a double catapult with a high climber, that's going to be a common robot at Worlds this year. I've seen lots of them. If you have 4 balls and you haven't shot 2 of them by the time you start climbing, you get disqualified for that. So that's something just to be aware of. As you're a team, make sure that you don't start that climb too early. That's kind of a not obvious but very critical one that some teams miss. So yeah. Cool, so that's it for the rules. There are obviously other rules. These are those sneaky ones, though, that you want to make sure you keep up your sleeve, just in case you need to. Now, as you're going through the competition, you're going to have different chances to have different priorities, right? You're going to have chances to make decisions based on what options you have at the time, and they're not always easy decisions. The key is just to know your priorities. Kind of be aware. If I have the option of eating lunch right now and missing a match, or attending that match and maybe eating lunch an hour later, which one am I going to take? I'll tell you personally, I would play the match and eat lunch an hour later. I don't know. It's dependent on your team's goals. Again, kind of referencing the beginning of that presentation. We're like, all right, this is what it looks like. Now, this is kind of a really common one. Preparing for a match versus like not feeling awkward. I love personally to not feel awkward. I think it's like great to not look awkward and like ask teams if they want to practice. But honestly, practicing is so valuable. So that's one other thing that I would highly suggest you guys do. If you can, practice with those teams. We'll dive into what that looks like more later. But yeah. Finally, kind of a weird one. You know, we talked about helping other teams is really valuable, especially if they're coming up in your match. But if you also need to prepare for the match, like get your battery ready, get your controller set up and everything, how do you balance that? So the key is, you know, with all of these, there isn't explicitly one right answer to all of the like situations that are gonna come up. But you want to make sure you know your priorities, know what's most important to you, so that you're able to make the right decision when the time comes. Cool. So here we are, second to last item, preparing and practicing with teams. This is so critical. I've seen so many teams who show up at the competition and they have no idea what they're doing with their partner. And they're like, they start driving one way, their partner drives the other way, and they like crash into each other and get tangled for the match. Or they'll both go for the same goal or the same ball. And they don't realize that like they're wasting so much time because they didn't prepare ahead of time. So the key is, as you're going through it, go in and make sure that you do plan and coordinate with your teams. If possible, play a practice match. I personally love to bring a competition field to every tournament I can. I understand I can't always do it, so sometimes I don't end up bringing it. But every tournament I can, bring a competition field. That way I can practice basically whenever I want, because I get to say when we practice and when we don't. Drawing strategy maps, especially if you're not practicing, but even if you are, ahead of time, I will print out a picture of the field, or like 20 pictures of the field, and then for each match, I'll label, all right, this is match 35, and then this is the route that I'm going to drive, this is the route you're going to drive. You just draw on with pencils or something, and you say like, all right, I am going to start here, and I'm going to drive over here and score these goals. You're going to start here, drive over here, and score these goals. And just having that visually drawn out is so valuable to teams and to the people you're working with. Now, the last two kind of go hand in hand. Respecting the other team and making sure that you work with them is very important. Now, I will tell you, especially this year, you guys may be in a position, you have to on either side of it really, where you're either a really good team who can score every single ball, and you just want the other team to go sit in a corner and like do nothing for the match, or you're in a position where you want to score, you are wanted rather to sit in a corner, and the other team is going to go try and score all the points for you. Now, both of those are kind of awful positions to be in. And honestly, you will score in general less points if you try and have someone else just like sit out of the way and like don't interfere. Because the truth is that as you're going through your match, if you try and tell another team to sit out of the way, especially if they don't really like it and they want it to play, maybe their goals aren't to win champs. Maybe their goals are like just to have fun. They're not going to be very good at sitting in a corner, and they might accidentally come out and like get in your way now, and then they're like trying to score some balls where they're where you need to be to shoot. Long story short, usually when I have a team who I'm trying to figure out how to work with, the goal is to find a way for us to both score points together. Now, it's important to be able to look at a situation and say, all right, I understand for my team, I really just want to have fun. That team, I see that they are on track to rank first, and they really want to make sure that they rank well in this match. Let's see if we can find a way to combine that, and that's the secret. Find a way to basically find both of your goals and find a way to combine them in a way that works for both of you. So, kind of playing off that, it's really important that you not only know who you're working with, but also know kind of what you're doing there and how you're able to work with them in an effective way. Cool. So, final thing to keep in mind is focusing forward. The fact is, at Worlds, at any competition, any time in life, honestly, you are going to mess up at some point. If you haven't done it yet, well, it's coming soon, and it's going to be a big one, right? Just kidding. But basically, the idea is things are not going to go how you want them to sometimes, and the key is to learn from those mistakes and move forward. I mean, there's a saying that says the past does not equal the future unless you live there, right? So if you live in the past and you are so focused on the past, your future is not going to be so great. But if you're able to say, all right, this is what happened. This is what happened in the match. These are the mistakes I made. I won't make those mistakes again. And let's play our next match. That is like the mark of a really good driver and a really good player. I remember there was a driver once on my team who just could not let go of things. He was in a position. It was like a regional competition. It wasn't even Worlds. But he, made some silly mistakes throughout the day. He had like no practice, so it wasn't his fault that he made the mistakes. Like he needed more practice ahead of time that he didn't get because of other decisions we made wrong. And he just could not forgive himself. I mean, I was in the hotel room with him that night, and he was just like so upset that he couldn't sleep, that he'd made these poor decisions and lost us, a small number of points. So the key is look at the past, learn from it, but don't live there, and make sure that you can let go of that and say, that was painful, that wasn't what I wanted to do, but I'm not going to do that again, and I'm going to focus forward. So that's really key as you're going through Worlds. Make sure that when things don't go to plan, you keep going forward. Remember, this road to success is not straight, and it's not even headed up all the time. You got these detours. They go down even. They go sideways. They go back and forth. You got fails. Things are going to happen. But the key is to keep moving forward. Otherwise, you'll never reach the little sunrise. Cool. So just to recap real quick, and we'll jump into questions and answers. First thing that really good and / elite is just like really top of the best teams do is they are actually very respectful and helpful to others. Now, this is not like a hard, fast law. There are teams who are good, who are not very nice. Ordinarily, they don't remain good for long, and in most cases, they end up getting beaten when they get to like the higher level competitions like Worlds. They're just usually a little bit arrogant in their like local district, which isn't very competitive anyway. So that can happen, but that's good to know. The next one, we said be confident about the rules. Know those rules that are likely to be broken or likely to need to be called out, or that judges might mess up on, refs might be messed up on, and know them and be confident enough in yourself to be able to come up to the ref, who is an adult who might not be very willing to accept input, and say like, hey, I don't agree with you. I think that this is how it's supposed to be, and be able to show the evidence for that. So that's very valuable. Next one is knowing your priorities. Know what's most important to you and know what's not. Be able to throw what's not valuable to you out and keep what is and kind of go based on that. Then we said, prepare, practice for a match. That's like super key as you're preparing. If you practice, that's great. If not, make sure you coordinate ahead of time with the teams. That's not just like 30 seconds in queue. That's like planning ahead. I remember that my teams would base how much they needed to practice on how willing the team was to practice. If the team was like super willing to practice, they'd be like, all right, we'll only practice once or twice. But if the team was like, oh, do we need to practice? They were like, yeah, that means that we really need to practice. And they'd like practice over and over and over with them. So that's super valuable. And then, of course, keep moving forward. Don't get stuck in the past. Cool. So I think that is just about it for our content for tonight. Let's go ahead and move into, our next section. Oh, I forgot the game. So, Vex IQ pitching and Slapshot. What do you guys think it is? Any thoughts? Throw them in the chat. Hockey, that's a popular belief. I'm not sure, says Rick. Hockey. Something to do with pucks. All right. Ooh, that would be cool, wouldn't it? A disc game, goals. There are probably some way to score points. Yeah. Want something there are multiple. Ooh, that would be interesting. Having different game pieces. Hockey. Another hockey. So yeah, I don't know. Oh, sticks. That would be interesting. We have not had a Vex IQ game with sticks before. That would be kind of cool. Disc being shot. That like frisbee? Wow, all right. So lots of good options here. Now, I do not know what the new game is, but I want to share with you some kind of, I would say, insider tips in figuring out the new game. So I think probably the most obvious thing is when you look at the logo, you can at least see a few things. One thing that you might notice is that it's not Vex IQ Challenge anymore. It's Vex IQ Competition. There's rumors about whether that means that we're having a head-to-head match or if they're just rebranding it. Vex has become much more competitive over the past years, and maybe it just means that in the future, we're going to be more competitive. It could also mean, though, that now we have a head-to-head match. I'm not entirely sure. Don't take my word for any of it. This is completely prediction. You'll know on Tuesday for sure. I don't think we're going to head-to-head, but, there's a chance. Now, other thing, obviously, slap shot. If you look it up, it's a shot in hockey where you... I don't play hockey, just for reference. But it's a shot where you, lift up the stick a decent amount off the ground before you hit the puck in order to make sure you get a stronger shot and basically the puck goes further. So, potentially a reference to hockey. Potentially not. We'll see kind of how that goes. If there's a puck, there's probably a lot more than one puck on the field. Vex has historically had somewhere between 20 and 50 game pieces on the field for a match. And we have a big field this year. So, not sure how that looks. One other fun thing to do is... Let me pull it up. If you go to Vex's website here, vexrobotics.com, they already know what the new game is, right? And sometimes they release hints. So we'll go to Vex IQ, shop all products, and then I can actually sort by newest products first. So let's go and do some history real quick, just so I can show you kind of what this does. Come on. Go back. So you guys know what pitching in is, obviously. Before the pitching in game was released, they released this new product, flywheel weights. And so I was like, that's interesting. And they released a few other products. A lot of them were just beams and stuff. And so I was like, all right, that's not going to give me any hint about the game. But these flywheel weights really stood out to me. And they released some gears as well. A lot of gears. And so I was thinking kind of along the lines hey, maybe this is a shooting game. And sure enough, pitching in was a shooting game, as you know. This is when pitching in was released. Now, since pitching in, Vex has rolled out Gen 2, which probably has nothing to do with the new game. But they've also released a few new interesting things. These are the products that are kind of interesting to me. They've released a winch set. Not sure what that is. That could be interesting. Winches are part of Gen 2, so maybe this is just part of Gen 2. Maybe this has something to do with the game. Maybe we're doing some kind of climb or pull-up or something where winches would be valuable. Here is a linear motion pack. Maybe we're scoring in some goal that we need to lift things up, straight up and down for. And then also, Vex has released some big wheels and treads that I've never seen in Vex before. So, maybe there's some big bumps in the field. I don't know. This is all speculation, just to be clear. Nothing that I said tonight is word or law, Nothing here is 100% accurate, but maybe it gives you some thoughts. Yeah, kind of, I don't know. Let me know what you think. If you got any other ideas in the chat, certainly drop them in. So, yeah, I'm kind of interested. I am excited for this new game. Not sure entirely what it's going to look like, but it could be a good time.